On the overcast morning of March 3, 2022, Fábio Santoro, investigative journalist from the independent channel Dark Archive, parked his car in front of a crumbling structure on the outskirts of the town of Fronteira Velha. Nature had swallowed the front gate, and the windows were blinded by time, with rotting curtains fluttering at the slightest breath of wind. The house that once belonged to the Ferreira family was now just a carcass, forgotten by justice, by the neighbors, and most of all by the press. But to Fábio, that carcass pulsed with something still alive. It was the starting point for one of the most disturbing discoveries ever documented on his channel. It wasn't a tip-off, it wasn't a dossier, it was pure chance. A single anonymous comment left on an old video. Just 7 words. Go to the Ferreira house, look behind the piano. The truth is there. Fábio stepped through the debris of the entrance, filming each step, narrating into his mic, like he was on an archaeological expedition. The floor creaked beneath his feet, covered in layers of dust, dried animal droppings, and shattered glass. The kitchen looked as if it had been abandoned mid-dinner. Plates still in the sink, a chair toppled over, and dark stains on the tiles that defied time itself. In the main room, he found the old piano mentioned in the comment. Draped in a torn sheet, its wood was chewed up but still intact. Fábio lifted the cover and found nothing, just dust and detuned strings. But when he pushed the piano a few inches, he heard a distinct sound, something sliding inside the wall, a dull thud, a hidden compartment. Behind the piano was a narrow hatch, sealed with a rusted screw. Armed with a pocket knife and a shot of adrenaline, Fábio forced it open. Inside was a dark wooden chest, carved with an upside-down cross. It held dozens of VHS tapes, a thick notebook, and a box of decayed photographs. The notebook gave off a pungent scent, mildew, age, and something else, metallic. In the lower corner of the cover, the name Francisca Ferreira and the title House Rulebook. Each page bore handwritten commands in red ink. Do not speak after the 7th chime. Complete fasting during waning moons. Children are not people, they are clay. Rules that read more like sentences. Among the tapes, some were labeled with dates and codes, F1, F2, F3, up to F12. One was broken, its ribbon frayed as if someone had tried to destroy it. Tape number 13, F13, was isolated, wrapped in a stained white cloth. As Fábio touched it, a violent chill ran through him, one that had nothing to do with the temperature. It felt like the object didn't just contain footage, it held a presence. He couldn't know, not yet, that this tape was the key to everything, nor that by pressing play days later, he would trigger a chain of events that would lead to his own psychological unraveling. Before leaving the house, Fábio filmed a wide shot of the room. Hours later, while reviewing the footage, he noticed something he hadn't seen during filming, a figure standing still in the hallway, visible for just 1 second. Blurry, unmoving, but feminine in form, wearing a dress identical to one of the portraits found inside the chest. With filters applied for contrast and enhancement, it became clear it was Francisca Ferreira. She didn't blink, she didn't breathe, but she was there, watching, as if she had never left that house, as if she still ruled in silence the cult of obedience everyone thought was extinct. There is no official record of the Ferreira family in school registries, electoral rolls, or medical files between the years 1980 and 1992. On paper, it was as if they had never existed. But in the muffled memories of the oldest residents of Fronteira Velha, they were remembered vividly as those from the tall house on the hill, the mute ones by choice, the family with bells on their gate. It was said that even when the entire town gathered to celebrate Carnival in the square, the Ferreiras never came down. Their windows stayed shut, their lights always on, even at noon. It was as if time itself followed different rules within that house. Rules imposed by Francisca Ferreira, known, the matriarch, whose very presence hushed even the whispers of her neighbors. Francisca was a woman with a severe face, her hair braided down to her waist, and eyes that pierced straight through people's words. A widow since 1978 after the sudden and never clarified death of her husband Flavio, a fall down the staircase during a stormy night, she began ruling the house with iron laws, blending archaic religion, local folklore, and a doctrine of her own creation that she called the discipline of inner silence. Her twin sons, Felipe Tenpao and Fernando Honau, never went to school and were rarely seen beyond the confines of their property. Those few who had glimpsed them described pale children, always dressed in white, heads bowed, eyes that never made contact. They spoke only through gestures. No one had ever heard a voice from that house. In addition to the twins, there was a third child, their cousin, Fabiola, forcibly brought to live with the Ferreiras after her mother died in a mysterious fire in 1982. Fabiola was 8 years old, born mute, but her drawings, discovered years later, hidden behind furniture and picture frames, screamed with disturbing intensity. She drew people without eyes, staircases that led to floating doors, and always, the figure of a long-haired woman with a sewn-shut mouth. Francisca, the mother, the leader, the silent oracle of that house beyond time. None of the children were taken to doctors or churches. Their only contact with the outside world was the grocery delivery man, who left supplies at the gate and received sealed envelopes of money in return. Once, he reported muffled screams coming from the second floor. But when police attempted to investigate, they were met at the door by Francisca herself, holding an official-looking quarantine order dated 1979. It was a fake document, but bore a real stamp, declaring the house to be under biological contamination risk. After that, no one tried to enter again, and for years, no one heard screams anymore, only silence. And that silence was law. Literally. According to the journals uncovered by Fabio, the house functioned like a spiritual order. Sound destroys, silence purifies, sound attracts, silence protects. Children were punished for sneezing, coughing, or even heavy breathing. They were forced to sleep with small stones in their mouths to learn the art of breath control. One entry described a ritual called the Night of Living Silence, during which every member of the household had to remain completely still and mute for 13 hours, under threat of being taken downstairs. To this day, no one knows what exactly that meant. Francisca also maintained a hidden altar inside a wardrobe filled with objects that defied explanation. A porcelain doll with real human teeth, a spoon twisted into a spiral, a crucifix with eyes carved into each arm, and a journal written in a blend of archaic Portuguese, Latin, and invented glosses. The word children appeared repeatedly, followed by verbs like erase, tame, and empty. As the years went by, the Ferreiras faded from the town's memory. Then, in 1992, after the last known disappearance, the house was abandoned. No record of relocation, no sale, no news. The Ferreiras simply vanished. The local police closed the case, citing lack of evidence, but the townsfolk still remember. At night, the gate bell would still ring on its own, as if the wind, or something else, still wandered that property, as if the cult of silence was still waiting for its faithful to return. The tapes were digitized by Fabio in his apartment in São Paulo after a week of failed attempts to find someone willing to watch them with him. Even his closest contacts from the channel refused. "Old things bring new things," said a video technician who dropped off the equipment and left without charging. The tapes, worn and gray-toned, emitted a sharp, bitter smell as they were unwrapped from the cloth that enveloped them. The first one, labeled only as F1, begins with static, followed by a high-pitched noise and a flickering image of a wooden chair in the center of a dark room. For 53 minutes, the camera remains still. At times, a metallic clinking can be heard. Other times, what seems to be irregular breathing near the mic, although no movement is seen. A homemade caption in the lower left corner displays the word training. Tape F2 shows Felipe and Fernando at 9 years old standing against a wall marked with black handprints. Both are blindfolded. Francisca, recognizable by her firm, grave voice, guides an exercise in absolute silence in which the boys must remain completely still as brutal sounds echo in the background. A woman screaming, something being dragged across the floor, and what sounds like a child sobbing and banging against wood. The audio cuts out abruptly every 17 minutes, returning with magnetic noise that resembles overlapping whispers. In one of those glitches, a near-inhuman voice says something like, "Obey and see." In tape F3, Fabiola appears for the first time. Sitting on the floor surrounded by scattered drawings, she sketches compulsively, while Francisca narrates off-camera, reading from a doctrinal text. Every sound has a source. Every source has a scream. Every scream tears the flesh. Et Allah. Fabiola then holds up one of the drawings to the camera. It shows a woman nailed to the wall with her mouth ripped out. Instead of eyes, two hollow sockets leaking something dark. It is the first of many images that, as Fabio later narrates on his channel, could not have been drawn by a child, not without having seen things no adult should ever witness. Tapes F4 through F8 are variations of sessions called silent body training. In them, the twins are forced to stand still for hours in the rain, sleep inside crates beneath the stairs, and feed only on dark liquids, never identified. In F6, Francisca appears for the first time on camera, seen only from behind. Cloaked in a black veil that covers her entire body, her voice chants repeatedly in Latin, "Corpus mutus, veritas mane." The body silences, the truth remains. The recording is accompanied by what can only be described as reversed chanting, murmuring syllables that sound like inverted prayers. But it's tape F9 that breaks the documentary format and descends into the realm of the unexplainable. The camera is positioned at the base of the basement stairs. Francisca is heard off-screen, instructing her children to go down one by one. The lighting is minimal, but the shadows seem to move even before anyone steps into frame. At minute 24:03, the camera captures a figure standing still at the bottom of the stairs, a childlike silhouette, motionless, facing the wall. None of the children are visible at that moment. The recording continues, but the figure never leaves. Instead, a magnetic distortion forms around it, as if the tape itself warps in the entity's presence. After that moment, all subsequent tapes exhibit similar distortions, especially during any mention of the downstairs. Fabio reports that during digitization, his computer would freeze, power would cut out, and files would become corrupted whenever he tried to edit those specific clips. Most disturbing of all, the videos would continue playing audio even after being paused. One night, according to Fabio's own account on his channel, tape F9 began playing on its own. Francisca's voice, clear and unmistakably recent, said, "You are seeing. Now you belong." The content of tape F12 ends with the twins kneeling before Francisca. An altar with incomprehensible symbols, ancient objects, and a porcelain doll with sewn-shut eyes fills the frame. Francisca's voice closes the footage with a sentence that would only make sense later: "Those who silence themselves are heard forever." It is the last tape in chronological order. Tape F13 remains sealed, untouched, wrapped in cloth, as if even Francisca herself feared its contents. Fabio, hesitant, decides not to play it immediately. But something has already shifted. Ever since the restoration began, his home has experienced electrical interference, appliances turning on by themselves, and doors opening at exactly 3:12 a.m., the same time that appears in the lower corner of each tape during the rituals. What was once an investigation is now an invasion. What was once curiosity is now contamination. Among the many secrets buried beneath layers of silence in Frontera Velha, the disappearances of 7 children and teenagers during the late 1980s were always cloaked in flimsy explanations and contradictory versions. Between 1986 and 1992, 7 names were added to the city's informal mourning murals, but each case was filed away as a drowning runaway domestic accident or voluntary disappearance. Not a single body was ever recovered. No proof. Only a pattern that few dared to acknowledge, and all of the missing, and without exception, lived within a 3-kilometer radius of the Ferreira house. The first case was Flavia Martins, 11 years old, who vanished on a Friday afternoon in October 1986 while walking home from school. Her backpack was found 200 meters from the Ferreira property, carefully propped against a hedge. Her pencil case was still zipped shut. A withered flower was clipped to the zipper, a detail never mentioned in the official report, but later noted in a letter from the girl's mother. A flower that wasn't hers, and no one knew where it came from. The case was archived as a runaway after an unsigned note was found claiming she went to see the sea with a friend. Flavia had never seen the sea. In 1987, it was Felipe Tavares, age 9, last seen playing in the Central Square. His mother said that earlier that day, he had excitedly told her, "Today I'm going to learn how to play statue with the white boy." No one knew who the boy was. There was no other Felipe in the neighborhood. Footage from the pharmacy's security camera, the only one in town at the time, showed a double frame, the boy walking, and in front of him a pale, indistinct silhouette that seemed to float more than walk. The tape was reportedly lost in a flood the following year, or so the record says. In 1988, 2 siblings vanished, Fernanda and Fagner Oliveira, aged 13 and 15. They were riding their bikes to visit their grandmother, but never arrived. Their bicycles were found abandoned at the entrance to the old eucalyptus trail, a path that ended behind the Ferreira Hill. Most disturbing, fragments of white fabric resembling robes or tunics were found snagged in the lower branches along the path. The police report listed them as remnants of festive garments, possibly from Carnival, though it was September. No forensic tests were conducted. No search was made. The inquiry was closed after 11 days. In 1989, a new case reignited the town's whispers. Francisco Braga, 10 years old and hearing impaired, vanished during a municipal band rehearsal. He left his bugle on a bench and walked alone toward an alleyway. The most chilling detail came days later, when his 5-year-old brother was found wandering through the house in the middle of the night, whispering, "Call Francisco." He went to play silence with the lady from the stairs. No one understood it then, but today, the phrase, "play silence," appears repeatedly in the tapes uncovered by Fabio. The second to last case occurred in 1990. Felicia Nunes, 16, disappeared after a heated argument with her mother. She reportedly left home to cool off and never returned. But in 2003, during renovations of the old municipal school library, one of her notebooks was found with pages torn and lines scrawled obsessively. She whispers beneath the earth, "The woman with no eyes. The woman with no eyes. The woman with no eyes." The notebook was lost before it could be analyzed. Workers claimed that a thin woman in a gray dress appeared the next day, requesting the found objects, claiming to be the girl's relative. Her description matched the only known photograph of Francisca Ferreira. 1992 marked the final disappearance. Fabiola Ferreira, 17, niece of Francisca herself. Her last recorded appearance was in an unmarked tape found hidden inside a floor compartment in the basement. The distorted footage shows Fabiola in a trance, her eyes painted black, writing something on the floor with charcoal. The video cuts as she looks at the camera and whispers something unintelligible. When reversed and slowed down, the audio seems to say, "I am the last. Close the door." From that moment on, the house was completely abandoned. Years later, a young local priest, Friar Roberto, confessed to a friend that he had attempted to perform a silent mass on the Ferreira Hill at the urging of a grieving mother. During the service, birds fell from the sky, uninjured, just lifeless. The altar candle would not light, and the homily was interrupted by a piercing sound from the house's basement, even though it was completely empty. The friar never celebrated Mass again in Frontera Velha. Today, Fabio compiles every name, date, location, and connection in a digital investigation board on his channel. The images show arrows, circles, webs that spiral outward from the Ferreira house. But the more he organizes, the more distortions appear in the files. Documents vanish, photos become corrupted. And in a live stream that cut off abruptly, he said, before the screen went black. The whole town knew, but those who speak hear. Fabiola Ferreira arrived at the house on the hill at the age of 8 after her mother died in a suspicious apartment fire downtown. According to the fire department's report, the blaze originated in the electrical system, but there were signs the wires had been cut and deliberately reconnected. Her father had been absent for years. With only one living relative, Fabiola was sent to live with her aunt Francisca and the twins, Felipe and Fernando, who were already following the doctrine of silence with near religious zeal. From her very first day in the new house, Fabiola never spoke again, but not by choice. She had been mute since birth, the result of complications during labor that had damaged her vocal cords. Silence in her life was not discipline, it was destiny. And perhaps because of that, she was even more sensitive to things that could not be spoken. In the journals found inside the family's hidden chest, Francisca described Fabiola as the receiver, the vision before sound. And finally, she who does not wound the house with words. To the matriarch, her niece was more than a child. She was a vessel, a mirror polished enough to reflect the echoes from downstairs. Francisca subjected her to even harsher rituals than her own children: extended fasting, isolation sessions in the dark attic, and punishment for crying at night. Fabiola endured it all in silence, but she drew obsessively. During the digitization of the family's recovered items, Fabio revealed that over 80 of Fabiola's drawings had been hidden, inside books, behind furniture, and sewn into the hems of old clothes. The illustrations ranged from childlike to grotesque. Many showed a stairway descending into the earth's core, where children with stitched mouths sat in a semicircle around a winged female figure with her face veiled, eerily similar to Francisca. Others displayed the blueprint of the house with rooms that didn't officially exist, including an octagonal chamber with the infinity symbol drawn across its walls. Some drawings showed Fabiola scratching out her own eyes. In others, she depicted herself with her mouth open, and from within, small hands reaching out, as if other children were trying to escape. One of her notebooks, dated just days before her disappearance in 1992, contained a sequence of images connected by arrows: a child with eyes covered, a door opening on its own, a mirrored version of her own body, and finally, one last drawing, a spiral with a message written in jagged uppercase letters: "If you hear it, do not repeat." Beyond the drawings, there were signs that Fabiola had begun to show signs of premonition. According to informal testimonies from neighbors, she would appear at the house gate at strange hours, standing still, silently pointing at homes where something terrible would happen days later: a dead dog, a house fire, a heart attack. No one could say if it was coincidence or prophecy. But after the third incident, people started avoiding her gaze. Even silent, Fabiola became feared. Footage from the tapes revealed that Francisca began involving her directly in the rituals. In one recording, Fabiola holds a black candle with her eyes closed while Francisca whispers in an unidentifiable language. As the tape plays, Fabiola's eyes open slowly, but they are completely white. The audio distorts at the precise moment she raises her arm and points at the camera, her expression blank. In the bottom corner of the screen, for just a few frames, the phrase appears, "She sees through." The climax comes in footage recorded the night before Fabiola's disappearance. The tape, shot with the same camera used in previous rituals, shows the girl standing alone in the basement. Behind her, circular charcoal symbols cover the wall, along with what seems to be an old wooden door partially buried in the earth. Fabiola begins scratching the floor with the tip of what appears to be a bone. She writes something indecipherable. The screen goes black. When it returns, Fabiola is gone. The camera keeps rolling for 16 more minutes, capturing an empty basement as the sound of something being scraped echoes in the dark. She was never seen again. The town claimed she ran away. Police cited emotional instability and a dysfunctional family history as justification. But Francisca never filed a report. And when Fabio's team investigated the basement floor, they found, beneath loose boards, what appeared to be Fabiola's dress, peon, folded neatly and stained with something dried and dark. Inside the pocket, there was a small drawing, a staircase, a flower, and the word Humpat Murr. Listen, Chikyum, written in trembling letters. Since then, the videos related to Fabiola have been the ones most prone to technical distortion on the channel. Comments appear in unknown languages. Audio tracks duplicate. Fabio's face becomes blurred, and a female voice whispers in the background, saying words no one has yet managed to decode, but some viewers swear it sounds like Fabiola calling for help. From where? No one knows. The term, Children of Silence, appears for the first time in tape F7, spoken in a ceremonial tone by Francisca Ferreira during one of the rituals. But throughout the notes, diaries, and tapes digitized by Fabio, it repeats as the official name of a doctrinal structure hidden under the disguise of a traditional family. It wasn't just an ideology. It was a cult, about private napam, cult without external followers, confined to a single house, governed by absolute rules, enforcing extreme punishments, and built upon a central belief. Sound is the doorway to evil, silence its prison. The book found in the hidden chest, titled Manual of Sonic Chastity, is signed by Francisca and divided into 13 sections, each marked by unique symbols. The doctrine rests on the belief that reality is composed of waves, and between those waves, forbidden voices drift, searching for fragile bodies through which they can speak. Every child speaks before they understand. That's why they are vulnerable, reads one passage. Silence in this belief system is purification. To silence oneself is to lock the door with monsters outside. The first rule of the cult is explicit. No one enters, no one leaves. The voice is the door. Francisca believed the outside world was corrupted by residue of impure sound, and that her house was the last sanctuary untouched by contamination. The twins and Fabiola were referred to as primary vessels, containers to be emptied of identity so they could become pure. The process involved 3 stages. 1. Depersonalization, fasting, silence, sensory deprivation. 2. Neutralization, erasure of name, gender, and family memory. 3. Consecration, offering oneself to the living echo that dwelled downstairs. The concept of the us downstairs recurs obsessively in the texts. It is not merely the physical basement, but a spiritual dimension accessed through absolute silence, especially during rituals held on waning moons, eclipses, or dates linked to the deaths of family members. Most disturbing is Francisca's claim that the children had already descended once, and that they brought signs that the entity was listening intently. One line, scratched out and rewritten multiple times, reads, "She has no eyes, but she hears the bones." Fabio discovered in scattered notes that Francisca believed she had been Fauchiteurs chosen by the entity in her youth, after surviving a drowning at the age of 13. According to her account, during the near-death experience, she was taken to a dark, soundless place where a veiled woman touched her chest and said, "If you silence everyone around you, I will return to speak with you." From that moment on, she dedicated her life to creating an environment where this being, known only as the Mother of Listening, Ikchemd, could manifest. The cult's practices included the use of symbolic objects and twisted spoons to prevent group meals and avoid the crossing of voices during digestion. Veils over mirrors to keep children from seeing their own faces, suppressing the ego. Circular symbols, drawn in charcoal on the floor, used for deep listening rituals where children were placed at the center and forced to remain in silence for hours. The most shocking discovery, however, was the Wunce's Book of Severed Names, a small notebook where Francisca recorded the names of missing children from the town, alongside drawings of crossed-out mouths, dates, and phrases like "successfully emptied," "obeyed to the end," or simply vanished like sound. This confirms that the disappearances were no coincidence. They were part of the cult, each child a ritual. Francisca also documented the phenomena that occurred during the deeper rituals: objects moving on their own, blood seeping from the walls, children speaking languages they'd never heard, and above all, the sensation of being watched from inside the house itself. The cult believed that the more silence accumulated within those walls, the thinner the membrane between worlds became, until eventually sound would return, not as noise, but as a living voice. After revealing these discoveries, Fábio reported hearing whispers even when the videos were paused. Short, unfinished words, sounds impossible to place, yet with the cadence of speech. As if by listening to the content, he had opened one of the doctrine's doors and was now being absorbed by it. As if the mother of listening already knew that he, too, was learning how to fall silent. The tape labeled F2O ends with a phrase that would echo throughout the remainder of the investigation. She will come in darkness. Silence is her tongue. Flesh is her gift. Bikuila. The following tape, F13, remained sealed for years, wrapped in a white cloth marked with circular symbols drawn in charcoal and stitched with red thread. Fábio hesitated for weeks before breaking the seal. When he finally did, he wore gloves, dark glasses, and activated 3 cameras to document the playback. He knew he wasn't just dealing with footage, he was handling a ritual artifact, a recording that was itself part of the ceremony. The tape, recorded during the lunar eclipse of June 27, 1992, begins with a trembling image of the sky, the moon slowly being devoured by the Earth's shadow. In the background, a muffled, monotone chant repeats endlessly. The camera tilts downward, revealing the basement transformed into a primitive temple, black curtains draping the walls, white symbols drawn in concentric circles on the floor, and a wooden chair in the center, the same kind seen in earlier tapes. Tied to it with white scarves and blindfolded is Fabiola. Francisca appears next, her face covered by a thick crocheted veil, standing before the chair. She holds an undefined object wrapped in cloth. At her side, Felipe and Fernando kneel, bare-chested, their bodies marked with charcoal and eyes closed. The ceremony follows a sequence of whispered commands in Latin. The camera captures fragments of phrases like audi, taste, aperi, listen, be silent, open. As the eclipse progresses, the chanting intensifies. The video's audio grows muffled, as if recorded underwater. The image temperature shifts. A greenish hue takes over the frame, and Francisca's figure begins to tremble. But the tremor isn't hers. It's the footage itself. As if something were interfering with the camera's functioning. The tape glitches, returns, and reveals changes in the scene. The altar candles have been extinguished, the backdrop curtain torn, and Fabiola, still blindfolded, is now murmuring words that could not be hers. Fábio slowed the audio in his editing software. What he found was chilling. The voice emerging from Fabiola's mouth was not her own. It was adult, deep, female, and bore a foreign accent. The words spoken: "I saw, you brought me, but now, take me back. Horus." Francisca steps forward and, without lifting the veil, kisses Fabiola's forehead. Then she hands the wrapped object to Felipe, who unwraps it to reveal a porcelain doll, its eyes missing. He places it in Fabiola's lap. At the exact moment the moon disappears completely, the screen cuts to black. But the audio continues, a smothered scream, like multiple voices trying to exit through a single mouth. Then, absolute silence for 9 full seconds. And finally, a single phrase. The flesh is silenced. Now the listening is whole. The image returns with all figures gone. The camera now lies on the floor. Only a corner of the basement remains visible. But something moves there. A hunched, white silhouette, crawling out of frame. The tape ends in a slow fade to black. No sound. Just one final digital overlay. The only modern edit present in the entire footage. This tape must not be watched alone. If you are hearing this, you are no longer alone. In the following days, Fábio documented his state. He reported insomnia, voices in empty rooms, lights flickering at precisely 3:12 a.m., and objects shifting on their own, especially mirrors, which turned to face the wall by themselves. In one video posted to the channel, his voice falters briefly, as if a second voice, layered beneath his own, were trying to speak at the same time. The audience reacted intensely. Numerous viewers reported similar symptoms: nosebleeds, nightmares, featuring veiled female figures, headphone interference, and in 2 documented cases, temporary loss of speech. One subscriber left a comment that went viral. "After I heard Fabiola's video, I woke up with dirt on my feet and charcoal in my mouth. I live on the 8th floor." Tape F13 was removed for violating platform guidelines, but copies still circulate in obscure forums, and some insist it's not just a record, it's an invocation. That Francisca Ferreira never meant it as proof, but as a continuation of the ritual. And by watching it, you don't just observe the final cult, you repeat it. And if you repeat it, you belong. In August 2022, after the release of Part 3 of the Ferreira case dossier on the Dark Archive channel, Fábio received an anonymous email with the subject line, "Felipe is still alive, but he doesn't speak, and he's drawing again." Attached was a single scanned image, a graphite drawing of a spiral staircase descending into the chest of a human figure, its mouth stitched shut. In the lower corner, the signature was nearly illegible, but the name, Felipe F., was there, written in shaky strokes. The sender never replied to follow-up emails. Only one thing remained: an address. A rural psychiatric clinic outside the municipality of Santa Rufina, 120 kilometers from Fronteira Velha. Fábio went. The hospital was old, with deactivated wings and sterile white hallways that echoed every sound in suffocating waves. In the ward for patients in voluntary silence, he found a thin man, face marked by time, eyes fixed on the ground, and hands that never stopped, drawing, scribbling, scratching. Felipe Ferreira, now over 40, had been institutionalized as a teenager, found wandering barefoot on the state highway wearing torn clothes with the word "past," "maig close," "isirlem," scrawled in charcoal across his chest. For decades, no one knew who he was. Forged records, no family ever claimed him. He was treated as a lost case, diagnosed with psychogenic mutism, non-aggressive schizophrenia, and a state of permanent dissociative episode. Only after Fábio's videos went viral did the staff connect the dots. The imagery in the videos was identical to Felipe's drawings. He had reproduced scenes from the basement, the altar, the eyeless porcelain doll, and even the inverted spiral, in the same proportions Fabiola used to draw. But the most disturbing part was what Felipe began drawing. After Zikore, the videos were released. Over the following weeks, he created new illustrations, sequential, almost like storyboards of a tape that hadn't been aired yet. One series depicted a male figure holding a camera descending into a tunnel of mirrors. Another showed the Dark Archive YouTube channel with a cracked screen, and behind it, a veiled woman. The final sequence portrayed a face, faked Fábio's, with invisible hands stitching his mouth shut. In the background, a warning. If he shows it, the house opens. Despite the warning, Fábio continued his visit. He tried to speak, but Felipe said nothing. He only stared at a single spot on the wall, where a faint stain resembled the black spiral. From the rituals, at one point, Felipe handed him a drawing. It was Fabiola, eyes closed, holding the eyeless doll. Above her, written in trembling graphite, "She's still there, and she hears better than before." After this visit, glitches began to appear in Fábio's videos. Words embedded themselves in the subtitles. Files disappeared. A photo posted to the channel's Instagram appeared flipped hours later. And in the reflection of Fábio's glasses, Felipe's silhouette could be seen, though he hadn't been present when the photo was taken. Viewers reported that when pausing Part 5 at exactly 4:44, a low whisper can be heard. Slowed down and reversed, it says, "He saw. Now it's your turn." Felipe is still at the clinic, but since Fabio's visit, he's eaten less, slept less, and now draws only in black. Recently, staff began noticing a new pattern in his sketches: long corridors, slightly open doors, and eyes, countless eyes, emerging from within the walls. One psychiatrist commented, "He's drawing the house from the inside, but a house only he has seen, or one that saw him first." Fabio never planned to return. After visiting Felipe and the string of inexplicable events reported by his followers, voices in paused videos, audio distortions, names automatically struck through in digital files, and he had sworn to end the series. But the channel kept growing, the pressure mounted, and then a new anonymous message, physically left in his mailbox, forced a final decision. The note, unsigned, bore a single sentence written in what looked like charcoal. "She didn't leave. You haven't seen everything. The ground still speaks." Armed with night vision cameras, a high-sensitivity microphone, and 2 backup power banks, Fabio returned to the Ferreira house on October 13, 2022, at 10:13 p.m. The date was intentional. The exact night 30 years earlier when Fabiola vanished. The vegetation was denser now, the fence rusted, and the gate, which once groaned to open, was this time slightly ajar, as if time itself, or something else, had invited him in. Immediately upon crossing the threshold, Fabio noticed the air growing colder as he neared the basement. The air was thicker, and the dampness, so once merely unpleasant, now carried a metallic scent like coagulated blood. He began recording at 10:41 p.m., narrating every step. The house was silent, but not still. The silence had weight, as if it were being enforced, as if imposed by something unseen. Descending the basement stairs, the microphone captured a strange sound. 3 dry knocks, as though someone were banging their head against the wall. The sound repeated every 66 seconds during the entire descent. Upon reaching the basement, everything looked the same. Symbols on the walls, remnants of old rituals, the altar in ruins. But something was different. A steady draft coming from the east wall, where there had once been only a leaning cabinet. When Fabio moved it aside, he found a vertical crack in the masonry. Just beneath it, a hidden latch, coated in a layer of ancient plaster. Using a makeshift crowbar, he broke the wall. Behind it, a dark wooden door with buried hinges. The wood was moist but warm, as if someone had just touched it. Above the handle, carved with a sharp tool, were the words. It spoke. "Now listen." When he opened the door, a steep, uneven staircase descended deeper, far beyond the known levels of the house. The air that rose from below wasn't just cold, it was alive. It had scent, sound, even rhythm, like it was breathing. Fabio went down, filmed every step, every heartbeat, every breath that didn't feel like his own, and then he reached the chamber. It was an octagonal room with rough stone walls, a domed ceiling, and a giant mirror at the center, fully draped in a white cloth. On the floor, a ring of melted wax and personal items from the missing children, earrings, socks, locks of hair, and in the center, a porcelain doll with sewn-shut eyes and an old tape recorder at her feet. The recorder was on, but the record button was broken, and still, it was recording. When he touched it, Fabio heard his own voice, not from the present, but from a recording he had never made. The tape said, "I went down. I saw. I brought her back." Then a second voice, deep female, emotionless, continued, "Now you belong too." At that moment the lights failed. The microphone picked up sounds from every direction, childlike laughter, scraping, a woman singing in Latin, and finally the sharp clatter of something hitting the floor. The recorder, slipping from Fabio's hands. The camera, still rolling, fell sideways. The final image, the mirror's cloth being pulled back by invisible hands. Then, the transmission cut out. Fabio emerged from the basement 3 hours later, disoriented, with no memory of how he got out. The cameras were in his car, but the recorder was gone. From that day on, his voice began to falter in videos. Words dropped, syllables scrambled. Followers reported shadows appearing on the wall behind him, even when he filmed alone. The channel was terminated 2 weeks later for unexplained violations. The full footage of the final expedition was never released, but fragments leaked in anonymous forums. One clip shows a frozen frame of the mirror, now uncovered. Fábio's reflection is not there, but Fabiola's is. Smiling behind her, a veiled woman, and across the porcelain doll's now broken chest, written in dried blood, listening, always listening. After his final incursion into the main basement of the Ferreira house, Fábio returned days later with a small team, 2 production assistants and a sound technician, all equipped with protective gear, high-powered flashlights, and motion sensors. What they discovered beneath the basement, specifically behind the wall of the octagonal room, surpassed any hypothesis, even those already absurdly horrific. There, grotesquely carved, lay a narrow corridor, flanked by 7 stone compartments, the ear-fasting chambers. Each cell measured approximately 120 m high by 1 m wide, impossible to stand or lie down in. The only opening was a small slit in the wooden door, presumably for supplying liquid or air. The stench inside each was unbearable. Urine, mold, decaying flesh, and something worse, something chemical, ancient, fossilized. The first cell was empty except for a handprint in dried blood splashed on the back wall. The second contained a child's blanket and a human tooth, wrapped in cloth embroidered with the letter F. The third, the narrowest, bore fingernail marks on the ceiling and small bone fragments at the edges. The sound tech vomited upon entering. Fábio, shaken, continued recording. He later revealed that the fourth cell was completely covered in charcoal symbols, spirals, closed eyes, and a single word repeated dozens of times. Listen, listen, listen. The fifth cell held something that paralyzed the group for over 3 minutes. A mummified body, possibly a child, limbs contorted and jaw wired shut. There were no eyes. On the chest, carved with a sharp tool, read, "She listened too much." There were no prior records of this child in any investigation from that era. The body was left in place and immediately reported to the authorities, who, as before, refused to open a formal inquiry. The site was sealed off 2 days later. But that night, the footage of that segment vanished from the external hard drive. Only the audio remained. The sixth cell was boarded up from the inside. Directional microphone recordings captured constant dripping, despite no pipes or obvious moisture source. Upon opening the door, they found a doll seated on a plate of dark water, completely soaked. No windows, no water source. The doll's eyes, once stitched, had now been ripped out. One assistant claimed to see the doll move its head. The camera footage didn't confirm it, but the shadow behind it, captured on film, Vitas, appeared to smile. The seventh and final cell was empty, but on the floor lay something none of the others contained. Loose soil, a perfectly rounded mound, as if excavated from the inside. Touching it, Fábio found a small wooden box containing a note written in Fabiola's handwriting. "This one is mine. I'm still listening." Since that discovery, Fábio has not slept. His last published video was audio only. He reports whispers in his home's plumbing, images appearing in mirrors upon waking, and the repeated sound of dry knocks. 3, always at 3:12 a.m. He also says that when he closes his eyes for more than 5 minutes, he hears something being scraped forcefully on wood and, in a much lower tone, someone repeating his name as though testing the sound of his voice. According to Francisca's manuscripts, the fasting chambers were the womb of the final silence, the place where children were left to die in thought so they could free themselves from the noise that imprisoned the soul in flesh. In her words, the body is loud. It must learn to silence itself from within. Only then will it hear what lives below the mouth. Fábio never returned to the house, but days after releasing the incomplete footage, hundreds of followers reported sounds coming from inside their own closets. Others began dreaming about tiny cells and eyes sprouting from walls like living fungus. One follower sent a desperate message to the channel. "I dreamt I was trapped in chamber number 8, but you only showed 7. Why did she lie?" At the entrance to the town of Frontera Velha, there's a small shop, a corner store with an old counter and a card reader that only works when it feels like it. The owner, Francisco Neto, has been there for over 40 years. In a recorded interview with Fábio, never publicly released but cited in his journal, he pauses for a long time before saying, "If you think their mother is dead, then you've never seen who opens the gate at dawn." The phrase, delivered without dramatic effort, closes any doubt about the town's perception. Francisca Ferreira never left. Older residents claim they still hear bells jingling at the hillside gate, always around 3 a.m. A woman who walks her dog every night swears she has seen, at least 3 times, a thin female figure with long hair and gray clothes standing beside the house. She doesn't walk, she glides, like she's made of trapped wind, and she saw me. I know she saw me. In another account, a substitute mail carrier claims to have been greeted by an elderly woman with a fixed gaze, while attempting to deliver mail repeatedly returned with the note, "Resident not found." According to him, the woman spoke, but when reviewing the footage from his body cam, the audio had been replaced by a high-pitched screech, the same tone registered on the original tapes. Official records list Francisca Ferreira as deceased in 1994, following an alleged collapse on a bus with no witnesses. The body was said to be cremated by order of an unknown relative. No photos of the wake exist. No local notary confirms the issuance of the death certificate, and the urn containing her ashes was never delivered to the family. It's as if her death was simply another part of the cult, a ritual performance, a disappearance trick. In later investigations, Fábio uncovered a letter never sent, addressed to the federal police, written by a former local officer in 2005. The man claimed to have returned to the Ferreira house to investigate reports of satanic teenagers trespassing on the property, and that upon entering the basement, he saw Francisca sitting on the wooden chair, her back to him. As he approached, she slowly turned her face, and he blacked out. When he came to, he was outside the house, his uniform torn and his watch frozen at 3:12. He never returned to work. The letter was found years later in a drawer. The image of Francisca Ferreira has circulated as an my entity, not a woman anymore, but a symbol of a presence that lingers in places where silence is heavier than air. In reports sent to the channel, people described nausea, dizziness, pressure in the skull, and temporary hearing loss when passing near the house. A child once claimed to speak with a lady who talks without a mouth during a school trip, though the house was sealed off that day. But nothing was as disturbing as the account of Laura Siqueira, a former resident who, in 2021, returned to Frontera Velha to visit her ailing mother. While passing the old Ferreira Hill, she decided to record a story for her social media. The video lasted 7 seconds, just the house in the background, nothing more. But when watching it at home, Laura noticed that in 3 different frames, a figure appeared in the second-floor window. When filtered in negative, the image reveals a veiled woman holding a porcelain doll, the same one from the last moon ritual. The most terrifying part, when Laura tried to delete the video, it kept reappearing in different folders. Even after changing phones, the footage returned from the cloud. In a moment of despair, she uninstalled all her social media and eventually lost her voice. Medical tests showed no lesions. Since then, she communicates through notes, and all of them end the same way. She lives here. She lives in me now. Fábio closed this block of the dossier with a personal observation never before recorded on video. In a live stream that was cut short by technical issues, he said, "Some days I wake up and feel like I'm not the only one inside my body. There's someone listening from within. There's someone very quiet." From the beginning of the investigation, one detail refused to make sense. Why was Felipe found in a catatonic state while Fernando vanished without a trace? The last time the two were seen together was in tape F10, during the ritual just before the 1992 eclipse. Both kneel side by side, blindfolded, while Francisca wraps them in a white cloth chain and whispers, "One will guard, one will silence, both shall be house." In the next recording, Fernando is gone. He's not mentioned in the final diaries. No physical evidence remains. Even when the police were forced to inspect the house after Fabio's videos went viral, no school records, no medical charts, not even photographs could prove he existed independently. It was as if Fernando were a reflection of Felipe, a flesh-born echo lost inside the walls. But absence, like everything in this case, wasn't silence. It was a message. In 2022, Fabio was contacted by an anonymous source claiming to have identified a psychiatric shelter patient 400 kilometers from the city, with an almost blank clinical history, yet who drew symbols eerily similar to those of the Ferreira cult. Without any ID, he was registered as Francisco Enriquez, possibly a mistaken reference or pseudonym. He appeared to be around 40 with sunken eyes, reclusive behavior, and periodic bouts of compulsive writing in Latin. When Fabio visited, the man didn't speak, but upon seeing a printed image of the doll from tape F13, he smiled. During the visit, Francisco N. was allowed to scribble on a notepad. What he drew was disturbing: a shattered mirror, a boy staring into his own mouth, a faceless woman sitting on two stitched heads, and finally, a man without a shadow. In the corner, written in childlike handwriting, was a sentence in archaic Portuguese, the sound's twin lives in the echo. Forensic analysis compared the drawing to Felipe's. The curves, pressure, and stroke patterns were identical. Only one detail differed. Francisco N. wrote with his left hand. Felipe was right-handed. The theory that Fernando assumed a new identity after the 1992 ritual became unavoidable. In the house diaries, Francisca writes of the final division, one to the world, one to the basement, and the echo between them. Experts interpret this passage as a symbolic ritual of a split identity, where two brothers embody opposing roles, one who contains the entity and one who delivers its message. Felipe, silent, broken, trapped in the past. Fernando, hidden, active, perhaps now, the very vessel of the cult's continuity. Fabio began investigating civil records for names starting with F and born around that time. He found 6 candidates across 3 states. All had histories of selective mutism, temporary disappearances during adolescence, or complete estrangement from their families. But the most disturbing case emerged in Minas Gerais, a man named Fernando Fonseca, who worked night shifts as a librarian at a Catholic school, never married, no social media, a cross-shaped scar on his chest, and no one was ever allowed inside his home. After several emails, Fabio received one reply, no text, just an audio file, 4 seconds long. A whisper that said, "You still listen? Then come back." In the background, one unmistakable sound, the metallic chime of wind bells, the same ones hanging at the Ferreira house gate. The terrifying conclusion is simple. Fernando never left. He just shed his skin. Perhaps he never existed as a person. Perhaps he was shaped since childhood as the vessel of the listening mother, the avatar of the cult. Or perhaps he is now what Francisca once promised the entity: a living house, in human form, a body for the voice to escape into. Since then, Fabio has broken all contact. He never mentioned Fernando publicly again. But sharp-eyed followers noticed something. In one of the recent video thumbnails, when zoomed in 300%, there's a reflection on the monitor behind Fabio. It's not his. It's someone who looks exactly like Felipe, but smiling. Tape F13 was never meant to be seen. At least that was the implicit belief in Francisca's writings, where she noted that this tape holds not a memory but a key. Isolated from the others, wrapped in stained cloth and stitched shut with red thread, it was the last artifact recovered from the wooden trunk hidden behind the piano. It bore a hand-drawn symbol, unseen elsewhere in the house, 2 inverted arcs, with a central dot that resembled an moa iles. Around it, fragmented Latin phrases and invented glosses. Out of caution, Fábio hired a specialized team for secure digitization. But even offline, the computer crashed 3 times before it could play the file. On the 4th attempt, the tape began, and what it showed wasn't a ritual. It was a symbolic execution, a slow extermination. One of the child disappearances from the 1980s, recorded in real time by Francisca herself. The footage opens on a child later identified as Francisco Braga, age 10, a deaf boy who vanished in 1989. He sits in the center of a stone room, the same octagonal room in the basement, recognizable by the pattern of stones and a rust stain in the corner. He's bound by white cloth, blindfolded, and has something in his mouth, a porcelain button. A digital overlay reads, "Final silencing ceremony, 3:12 a.m. In the background, Francisca's voice. She doesn't shout. She recites but like prayer. Her words are slow, deliberate. Tonight we erase the world's sound to make space for what listens. She circles the boy slowly, pouring a dark liquid, presumably blood, forming an infinity symbol on the floor. With each loop, one candle extinguishes. With the final one, the room falls into total darkness. But the camera keeps recording in full clarity, as if it could see without light. That's when the boy begins to shudder. His breathing escapes in harsh, forced gasps. The footage shakes, the audio cuts out, and then absolute silence. But time moves on. The digital counter advances. For at 4 minutes and 27 seconds, there's not a single sound. No ambient noise, no breath, no tape hiss, as if the very concept of sound had been erased from reality. When the sound returns, it's as a whisper. He did not hear, but now he hears better than all. The image shows Francisco still, his head slumped. A thin trail of blood runs from one ear. Around him, shadows move, without source, without logic, without light. The stone walls seem to bend inward, reality tightening like a fist around the child. Then, something crawls into frame. A humanoid figure draped in veils, hunched, with arms too long. It approaches, it touches the boy's shoulder, and he opens his eyes. Even blindfolded, he looks. The camera glitches, the audio erupts into white noise, and when it returns, one last sentence remains, layered in Francisca's voice, like an epilogue. The sound escaped, the body remained. Listening will never again be yours. Fábio cut the broadcast at that moment. Even on secondary channels or secret forums, no one has ever posted the full version. Every upload crashes. Some files vanish, others corrupt the systems they're played on. Frame-by-frame forensic analysis revealed something more terrifying. At 2 points in the footage, the viewer's own reflection appears on the stone wall. Though it's a recording, it interacts with whoever is watching, as if the tape is watching back. After watching it in full, Fábio reported intense physical symptoms, nosebleeds, temporary hearing loss, sleep paralysis, and waking up with words written on his skin in charcoal. Listen, open, offer. Since then, he no longer speaks live. His videos are subtitled. Comments are disabled. Tape F13 has become a digital curse, an encapsulated entity, a ritual virus. And now that it's been decoded, no one knows what it's awakened. When Fábio released the initial analysis of tape F13, he included a warning. If you've made it this far, you're already listening. The phrase seemed theatrical, crafted as a hook, but the events that followed turned that warning into prophecy. The channel began receiving mass reports, not just of psychological terror, but of physical symptoms, sensory impossibilities. It was as if the curse that once remained entrapped in the house and the tapes had migrated. And now it spread through sound, through hearing, through curiosity. Viewers began to report eerily consistent symptoms, sudden migraines when watching specific segments, a sharp ringing in the ears at exactly 3:12 a.m., even with the video paused. The sound of 3 dry knocks from inside closets, wardrobes, or walls. Voices calling out the viewer's name in their mother's voice. One account deeply disturbed Fabio. A 16-year-old subscriber sent in an audio clip captured accidentally during a live stream of Part 8. In the file, along with Fabio's voice, was a second narration layered beneath. Deep, feminine, repeating phrases like, "Close your eyes, close your ears, open the rest." That voice wasn't in the original video, and when slowed down, it matched that of Francisca Ferreira. Members of Fabio's technical team were also affected. One, the sound engineer responsible for cleaning F-13's audio, quit the project after claiming he began dreaming of tiny cells where he was trapped inside, watching his daughter cry on the other side. In his last email, he wrote only, "Don't listen anymore, don't play it, don't offer it." Another assistant developed progressive aphasia. He could no longer form words aloud, though he still understood everything. When he tried to speak, only one sound came out, 3 dry knocks, identical to the ones recorded in the basement. Even skeptical viewers began noticing system failures, apps freezing at the same exact minute, audio from unrelated videos playing reversed segments of Fabio's voice. One user reported that, while watching a ritual compilation, their light bulb exploded, precisely when Fabiola opened her eyes during the eclipse ritual. A woman in another country reported her 5-year-old daughter began speaking Latin in a nightmare. She once screaming, "Corpus mutus, corpus mutus, corpus mutus." Even the platform itself was affected. Videos were taken down for violations despite having no explicit content. Comments vanished automatically. Words like mirror, veil, listen were blocked by the algorithm, as if someone, or something, was once again silencing the case, but this time digitally, invisibly. In a letter posted on his personal blog, now offline, Fabio wrote, "I don't know if this investigation opened something or just let me hear what was already there. But what I can say is this: now that I hear it, I can't unhear it." The curse of silence, crafted by Francisca Ferreira over decades, was designed to outlive her flesh. It took, contaminated her children, consumed Fabiola, built living chambers, and now it's found new rituals through views, through headphones, through paused videos. Because what Francisca worshipped, what she called the mother of listening, no longer needs chants, candles, or midnight rites. Now she has the internet, and we have exposed ears. The curse is no longer in the house. It's in you. If you've made it this far, you've heard too much. Fabio's final video was uploaded without any schedule or notice on the Arquivo Sombrio channel at exactly 3:12 a.m. on November 1st, 2022. The title had no description, no thumbnail, no intro, just a name, Fabiola. The video begins with the camera already on, shaking in Fabio's hands. He looks visibly disturbed, deep-set eyes, pale skin, shallow breath. He's in his office, but something is off. The walls are covered with printer paper, each page handwritten with phrases like silence, she listens, closed body, living door. In the background, there's a doll, but not just any doll. It's part of the same one from tape F-13, now sitting right on his shelf. How it got there, no one knows. Fabio doesn't begin with his usual tone, no intro, no music. He simply stares into the lens and whispers, "I know now, I understand." Then he says nothing, for 12 full seconds. In the silence, there's a hum, not digital, but organic, like the vibration of air in a sealed, breathless room. He continues, "She didn't live in the house. The house was her ear. We are the new structure. I'm a room now. And you?" His voice breaks. The mic distorts. The image glitches. He tries to stop the recording, but the feed keeps running. He walks to the shelf and picks up an old cassette recorder, presses play. What comes out next defies technical definition. It's not a voice. It's a sonic presence. Something between a baby's cry, a woman's breath, and wind inside a damp tunnel. A sound that's intimate, cold, familiar. Upon hearing it, Fábio begins to cry, but not in fear, in something else, acceptance. She just wanted someone to listen until the end. The image fades, the screen freezes on his face. Slowly, his image erases itself, not with a cut, but as if reality was overwriting him, like a tape re-recorded, like a memory rewritten. The screen goes black for 30 seconds. At the end, a caption appears. This isn't about belief, it's about listening. The house is no longer there. She's in every sound. Thank you for opening the door. The video vanished from the channel minutes later, but not before dozens of users downloaded it. Several reported that after watching, their names began to whisper from inside voice messages. Others claim that when played a second time, the video changes. Fábio doesn't appear. Who does is you. Arquivo Sombrio was permanently shut down. Fábio's apartment was found empty, except for a single note taped to the mirror. The listening now lives in complete silence. His body was never found, but every night at 3:12 a.m., the video reappears on a random profile. And when it plays, you hear your name in the background, even if you're not wearing headphones.